We continue Plutarch's Lives, translated by John Dryden, revised by Arthur Hugh Clough. Not long after, Timoleon, marching up to the city of the Laotines, took Hicetatus alive, and his son Eupolemus, and Euthymus, the commander of his horse, who were bound and brought to him by their own soldiers. Hicetatus and the stripling his son were then executed as tyrants and traitors, and Euthymus, though a brave man and one of singular courage, could obtain no mercy because he was charged with contemptuous language in disparagement of the Corinthians when they first sent their forces into Sicily. It is said that he told Leontini in a speech that the news did not sound terrible, nor was any great danger to be feared because of Corinthian women coming out of doors. So true it is that men are usually more stung and galled by reproachful words than hostile actions, and they bear an affront with less patience than an injury. To do harm and mischief by deeds is counted pardonable from the enemies, as nothing less can be expected in a state of war, whereas virulent and contemptuous words appear to be the expression of needless hatred and proceed from an excess of rancor. When Timoleon came back to Syracuse, the citizens brought the wives and daughters of Hicetatus and his son to a public trial, and condemned and put them to death. This seems to be the least pleasing action of Timoleon's life, since if he had interposed, the unhappy women would have been spared. He would appear to have disregarded the thing, and so have given them up to the citizens, who were eager to take vengeance for the wrongs done to Dion, who expelled Dionysius, since it was this very Hicetatus who took Arit, the wife, and Aristomache, the sister of Dion, with a son that had not yet passed his childhood, and threw them all together into the sea alive, as related in the life of Dion. After this, he moved towards Catana against Mamercus, who gave him battle near the river Abalas, and was overthrown and put to flight, losing above 2,000 men, a considerable part of whom were the Phoenician troops sent by Gisco to his assistance. And after this defeat, the Carthaginians sued for peace. I'm trying to give it more Greek pronunciation, and remember the J pronunciation of the G wasn't really in place back then. It wasn't in place at all back then, but which is granted on the conditions that they should confine themselves to the country within the river Lucus, that those of the inhabitants who wished to remove to the Syracusan territories should be allowed to depart with their whole families and fortunes, and lastly, that Carthage should renounce all engagements to the tyrants. Mamercus, now forsaken and despairing of success, took ship for Italy with the design of bringing in the Lucanians against Timoleon and the people of Syracuse, but the men in his galleys, turning back and landing again and delivering up Catana to Timoleon, thus obliged him to fly for his own safety to Messana, where Hippo was tyrant. Timoleon, however, coming up against them and besieging the city both by sea and land, Hippo fearful of the event, endeavored to slip away in a vessel, which the people of Messina, surprised as it was putting off, and seizing on his person, and bringing all their children from school into the theatre to witness the glorious spectacle of a tyrant punished, they first publicly scourged and then put him to death. Mamercus made surrender of himself to Timoleon, with the proviso that he should be tried at Syracuse, and Timoleon should take no part in his accusation. Thither he was brought accordingly, and presenting himself to plead before the people, he essayed to pronounce an oration he had long before composed in his own defense, but finding himself interrupted by noise and clamors, and observing from their aspect and demeanor that the assembly was inexorable, he threw off his upper garment, and, running across the theatre as hard as he could, dashed his head against one of the stones under the seats, with intention to have killed himself. But he had not the fortune to perish as he designed, but was taken up alive and suffered the death of a robber. A lot of people even, there's a lot of people who survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, or people who even fall under cement after many stories or something like this and end up surviving. So yeah. So very often, in terms of even this life, people who attempt suicide have made it worse. Thus did Timoleon cut the nerves of tyranny, and put a period to the wars, and, whereas, at his first entering upon Sicily, the island was, as it were, become wild again, and was hateful to the very natives, on account of the evils and miseries they suffered there, he so civilized and restored it, and rendered it so desirable to all men, that even strangers now came by sea to inhabit those towns and places which their own citizens had formerly forsaken and left destitute. Agrigentum and Gela, two famous cities that had been ruined and laid waste by the Carthaginians after the Attic War, were then peopled again, the one by Megellus and Pheristus from Area, the other by Gorgas from the land of Chaos, partly with new settlers, partly with the old inhabitants whom they collected again from various parts, to all of whom Timoleon not only afforded a secure and peaceful abode after so obstinate a war, but was further so zealous and assisting in providing for them, that he was honored among them as their founder. Similar feelings also possessed to such a degree all the rest of the Sicilians, that there was no proposal for peace, no reformation of laws, nor assignation of land, nor reconstruction of government, which they could think of well, unless he lent his aid as a chief architect to finish and adorn the work, and superadd some touches from his own hand, which might render it pleasing both to God and man. Although Greece, sort of side note, but religion is not this spirituality that either divorces the relationship with creation or divorces the relationship with God. Religion is something that regulates rights one owes to God and one owes to people. Of course, the ones owed to people can be done in the name of God and thus enhanced like that. But although Greece had in its time produced several persons of extraordinary worth and much renown for their achievements, such as Timotheus and Agesilaus and Pelopidas and Timoleon's chief model, Epaminondas, yet the luster of their best actions was obscured by a degree of violence and labor, insomuch that some of them were matter of blame and of repentance, whereas there is not any one act of Timoleon's, setting aside the necessity he was placed under in reference to his brother, to which as Timaeus observes, we may not fitly apply that exclamation of Sophocles. O gods, what Venus are, what grace divine did here with human workmanship combine. I call, the red symbol on the channel, the spiral thing, the state of absolute righteousness is that you're completely in line with one's true will, the divine command, etc., etc. And of course, the black symbol is the symbol of the consciousness thereof, the undefiled knowledge. That hopefully drives the actions. For as the poetry of Demachus and the painting of Dionysius, the artists of Colophon, though full of force and vigor, yet appeared to be strained and elaborate in comparison with the pictures of Nicomachus and the verses of Homer, which besides their general strength and beauty, have the peculiar charm of seeming to have been executed with perfect ease and readiness. So the expeditions and acts of Epaminondas or Agesilaus that were full of toil and effort, when compared with the ease and natural as well as noble and glorious achievements of Timoleon, compel our fair and unbiased judgment to pronounce the latter not indeed the effect of fortune, but the success of fortunate merit, though he himself indeed ascribed that success to the sole favor of fortune, and both in the letters which he wrote to his friends at Corinth and in the speeches he made to the people of Syracuse, he would say that he was thankful unto God, who, designing to save Sicily, was pleased to honor him with the name and title of the deliverance he vouchsafed it, and having built a chapel in his house, he there sacrificed to good hap as a deity that had favored him, and devoted the house itself to the sacred genius, it being a house which the Syracusans had selected for him as a special reward and a monument of his brave exploits, granting him together with it the most agreeable and beautiful piece of land in the whole country, where he kept his residence for the most part, and enjoyed a private life with his wife and children, who came to him from Corinth, for he returned thither no more, unwilling to be concerned in the broils and tumults of Greece, or to expose himself to public envy, the fatal mischief which great commanders continually run into, from the insatiable appetite for honors and authority, but wisely chose to spend the remainder of his days in Sicily, and there partake of the blessings he himself had procured, the greatest of which was to behold so many cities flourish, and so many thousands of people live happily through his means. As, however, not only, as Simonides says, on every lark must grow a crest, but also in every democracy there must spring up a false accuser. I don't think stuff like that is, required of that, but so it was at Syracuse. Two of their popular spokesmen, Laphustius and Demenias, or is that supposed to be T? There's letters blurred, so Demanitas by name, fell to slander Timoleon, the former of whom requiring him to put in sureties that he would answer to an indictment that would be brought against him, Timoleon would not suffer the citizens who were incensed at this demand to oppose it or hinder the proceeding, since he of his own accord had been, he said, at all that trouble, and run so many dangerous risks for this very end and purpose, that every one who wished to try matters by law should truly have recourse to it, and when Demanitas in a full audience of the people, laid several things to his charge which had been done while he was general. He made no reply to him, but only said he was much indebted to the gods for granting the request he had so often made them, namely, that he might live to see the Syracusans enjoy that liberty of speech which they now seemed to be masters of. Timoleon, therefore, having by confession of all done the greatest and noblest things of any Greek of his age, and alone distinguished himself in those actions to which the orators and philosophers in their harangues and panegyrics at their solemn national assemblies used to extort and incite the Greeks, and being withdrawn beforehand by happy fortune, unspotted and without blood, from the calamities of civil war in which ancient Greece was soon after involved, having also given full proof as of his sage conduct and manly courage to the barbarians and tyrants, so of his justice and gentleness to the Greeks and his friends in general. Having raised, too, the greater part of those trophies he won in battle without any tears shed or mourning, won by the citizens either of Syracuse or of Corinth, and within less than 8 years' space delivered Sicily from its inveterate grievances and intestine distempers, and given it up free to the native inhabitants, began, as he was now growing old, to find his eyes fail, and a while after became perfectly blind. Not that he had done anything himself which might occasion this defect, or was deprived of his sight by any outrage of fortune. It seems rather to have been some inbred and hereditary weakness that was found in natural causes, which by length of time came to discover itself. Now there's plenty of things he could have been exposed to. Seeing the sun or the reflection of the sun or something too much. Chemicals, all sorts of stuff. For it was said that several of his kindred and family were subject to the like gradual decay, and lost all use of their eyes, as he did in their declining years. Athanes, the historian, tells us that even during the war against Hippo and Mamercus, while he was in his camp at Mala, there appeared a white speck within his eye, from whence all could foresee the deprivation that was coming on him. This, however, did not hinder him then from continuing the siege and prosecuting the war till he got both the tyrants into his power. But upon his coming back to Syracuse, he presently resigned his authority of the sole commander, and besought the citizens to excuse him from any further service, since things were already brought to so fair an issue. Nor is it so much to be wondered that he himself should bear the misfortune without any marks of trouble, but the respect and gratitude which the Syracusans showed him when he was entirely blind may justly deserve our admiration. They used to go themselves to visit him in troops, and brought all the strangers that travelled through their country to his house and manor, that they also might have the pleasure to see their noble benefactor, making it the great matter of their joy and exultation, that when, after so many brave and happy exploits, he might have returned with triumph into Greece, he should disregard all the glorious preparations that were there made to receive him, and choose rather to stay here and end his days among them. Of the various things decreed and done in honor of Timoleon, I consider one most signal testimony to have been the vote which they passed, that whenever they should be at war with any foreign nation, they should make use of none but a Corinthian general. The method also of their proceeding in council was a noble demonstration of the same deference for his person, for determining matters of less consequence themselves. They always called him to advise in more difficult cases, and such as were of greater moment. He was, on these occasions, carried through the marketplace in a litter and brought in, sitting into the theatre, where the people with one voice saluted him by his name, and then, after returning the courtesy and pausing for a time till the noise of their gratulations and blessings began to cease, he heard the business and debate and delivered his opinion. This being confirmed by a general suffrage, his servants went back with the litter through the midst of the assembly, the people waiting on him out with acclamations and applauses, and then returning to consider other public matters, which they could dispatch in his absence. Being thus cherished in his old age, with all the respect and tenderness due to a common father, he was seized with a very slight indisposition, which, however, was sufficient, with the aid of time, to put a period to his life. There was an allotment then of certain days given, within the space in which the Syracusans were to provide whatever should be necessary for his burial, and all the neighboring country people and strangers were to make their appearance in a body, so that the funeral pomp was set out with great splendor and magnificence in all other respects, and the bier, decked with ornaments and trophies, was borne by a select body of young men over that ground where the palace and castle of Dionysius stood before they were demolished by Timoleon. There attended on the solemnity several thousands of men and women, all crowned with flowers, and arrayed in fresh and clean attire, which made it look like the procession of a public festival, while the language of all, and their tears mingling with their praise and benediction of the dead Timoleon, manifestly showed that it was not any superficial honor or commanded homage which they paid him, but the testimony of a just sorrow for his death, and the expression of true affection. The bier at length being placed upon the pile of wood that was kindled to consume his corpse. Sometimes it turns out those people are alive even to this day, and now in the embalming process, many embalmers have remarked that the person died as part of the embalming process because they were claimed dead, and it's rare, but it happens. Demetrius, one of their loudest criers, proceeded to read a proclamation to the following purpose: the people of Syracuse had made a special decree to inter Timoleon, the son of Timodemus, the Corinthian, at the common expense of 200 minas, and to honor his memory forever by the establishment of annual prizes to be competed for in music and horse races and all sorts of bodily exercise, and this because he suppressed the tyrants, overthrew the barbarians, replenished the principal cities that were desolate with new inhabitants, and then restored the Sicilian Greeks to the privilege of living by their own laws. You can refer to the millet system and how it's closer to what people would say anarchy, because, but, you don't have true absolute anarchy. You have, but, certain law, person-on-person crime is pretty much, the minorities, but they had their own laws and could operate with them to a certain degree, right? Besides this, they made a tomb for him in the marketplace, which they afterwards built round with colonnades, and attaching to it places of exercise for the young men, and gave it the name of Timoleon, and keeping to that form and order of civic policy and observing those laws and constitutions which left them, they lived themselves a long time in great prosperity.